You see? I told you it wasn't the final chapter. Not that that was really a big secret or anything, but I told you! Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning, is brought to us by director Danny Steinman and stars John Shepard, Melanie Kinnaman, and Shavir Ross. So it's been several years since Corey Feldman's Tommy Jarvis laid the fucking smackdown with a machete on Jason's fucking head. After such a horrific experience, it should come as no surprise that Tommy is a bit disturbed. So much so that as a young man, he is now in state's custody and being transferred to a new psychiatric ward in the woods. I mean, call me crazy, the woods and camp and all that kind of goes synonymous with Friday the 13th and Jason Voorhees even in this world, so sending this guy out to the fucking woods just does not sound like a good idea to me. But hey, the powers that be in this universe decided sounds like a good idea to us. Tommy is all kind of fucked up. He has hallucinations of Jason just all over the place. And I guess that's kind of understandable seeing as how what all he went through, and that was actually one of the things about this movie I did like. The movie explores what happens to these survivors of these horrific events in these movies that we see after the movie. If somebody went through one of these situations, they'd probably be pretty fucked. Kind of like Tommy. The guy's popping pills left and right, he doesn't trust anybody, and he don't talk too much. So when he gets to this camp with other young disturbed individuals and the bodies start piling on, we start to kind of look in Tommy's direction and say, hey buddy, you know, we remember that kind of like eye contact thing we did in the end of the last movie. What's really going on here? Are you taking on the role of Jason here? And that's kind of what the movie leads us to believe. Now, moving forward from here in the review, I am going to spoil what's actually going on here. And I get it, this is a 35-year-old movie and I'm talking spoilers, but just in case you haven't seen it, I ain't trying to ruin nothing for nobody. But if you have seen it, or you just don't give a fuck about spoilers, here we go. So even though the movie does kind of half-assedly try and lead us down the road that Tommy is the one that has become Jason, that's not the case. But it's not Jason either. No, it's some random ambulance driver who showed up at the scene of a murder that happened early on in the movie, and the murder victim was his estranged son. So all of a sudden, even though he's had absolutely nothing to do with this kid pretty much his entire life, now that just made him snap and he goes and just starts killing the fuck out of random people. I mean, like really random people. There's some people that get killed in this movie and you just don't know why the hell they were killed. They had nothing to do with anything. Well, I guess this was a bit of a twist there at the end. When you get to thinking about it, like any at all, it really just does not hold up to scrutiny. Because not only did this random guy start to kill random people because he found his estranged son he knows fuck all about dead, but he did it by dressing up like Jason, and he was able to make all this happen in like a fucking day. The only reason that the whole thing is any kind of surprise is because it just makes no fucking sense. So you of course never would have thought that. So yeah, Jason, he's not even in this movie, like in any shape, way, form, or fashion. Now in the very end of the movie, they decide to start going down the road that the movie was alluding to the whole time. In fact, they've been alluding to since the very end of the last movie, that Tommy may possibly be becoming Jason just through some kind of deranged kind of psychosis or something. And I do think that's a pretty neat idea. I think it's a neat exploration into the mental trauma somebody has from a crazy experience like this. Unfortunately, they just use it for that one more scare situation that these movies have become known for. If they would have fully committed to this, it would have been a really neat idea. But instead, it doesn't even come up until the last 60 seconds of the movie, making it mean not much of anything. And that brings us to the overall story. This is probably the weakest so far in the series. There's just not really anything that happens. Tommy is there and we're following him for a while, but at one point he just like fucking disappears and suddenly just shows back up in the end of the movie. Yeah, that's right. Our main protagonist that we're following for a good first third, if not half of the fucking movie, just suddenly disappears for a large chunk of the flick. Now there are a lot of kills in this movie. In fact, this one has the highest body count by far than any of the movies in the series up to this point. But that Friday the 13th creativity in the kills that really started hardcore in the last movie is kind of lost here. A lot of these kills are just kind of boring. We get a couple of neat ones, like a guy whose head is like strapped to a tree and then it's like twisted real hard until it kind of crushes his skull. But most of them just aren't really that great. And not just that, but there is a severe lack of gore here. There's blood, we see that, but a lot of the kills, the camera will like shift right there at the end and they somewhat take place off screen. You get blood splatter and spray and stuff like that, but you you don't really get to see the real good gore like you're expecting. It may not necessarily be the least gory in the series up to this point, but it does seem like it. It just seems like they're afraid to show the gore. And that's pretty unfortunate because when it comes to the movie's lackluster, kind of uninspired story, we could have at least gone for some really over-the-top, crazy, insane kills. But no, this one kind of fails there as well. Now, the characters and performances, they're pretty much in line with what we've gotten used to in the Friday the 13th series up to this point. Nothing great. I mean, these people are just there to get killed. They're more along the lines of the slightly goofy characters we had in the last movie, and that's kind of what we're gonna get moving forward, so get used to it. We get a couple of characters that remain serious from our main casts, but most of the other characters in the movie are kind of over the top and a bit goofy. Overall, the main cast, though, for a Friday the 13th flick, I mean, they're fine. There's nothing great here, but I mean, I wasn't like offended by their performances or anything. Now, the characters are all fairly shallow with the exception of Tommy, but even him, since he does disappear for half the fucking movie, you don't really get to know his character much more than you already did. Which, much like everything else, is a bit disappointing because he was the most interesting part of this story. The opportunity to see what happens to the survivors of these horrific events. And we get that a little bit, and then he's just gone. And when he comes back for one reason and one reason only, and there ain't much he does. Guys, unfortunately, Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning, was not a very good beginning. It is, in fact, in my opinion, the weakest entry in the series up to this point. The story is just nothing to write home about, which would be okay if it had that crazy Friday the 13th over-the-top violence to have a good time with, but that is kind of lackluster as well. Sure, there's a crazy high body count in this one, but we don't really get to see much of it happen, and what we do see is just kind of I really liked how they started to explore what it's like to be someone who would survive one of these events, but then, like I said, the character Tommy just disappears. It's like they set up a bunch of kind of interesting things in that story arc and just never really explored them. It's got an out-of-nowhere one more scare ending that I would have liked the idea behind had it been closer to the beginning. And while you'll be hard-pressed to see the twist coming without already knowing it, that doesn't mean it's a good one. Overall, it was just a disappointment and really only worth checking out on USA Up All Night.
It's not worth it.
Hi, I'm Gilbert Godfrey.
Hi, it's Miranda on USA.
It's so big. It's just not worth it.
It kind of sucks that this one is so disappointing because this is the first one that has a reoccurring character in it. The character of Tommy Jarvis, while not as iconic as Jason Voorhees, has definitely become a staple in the Friday the 13th series. While yes, he is predominantly featured in the next entry as well, when it comes to this one, it just didn't really do the character any favors. But if you are just like the most hardcore Friday the 13th fan and doing like a marathon of all the movies or something, yeah, I guess check this one out, but don't get your hopes up too much. So there it is, guys, my review of Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning. If you enjoyed and want more content like this, hit that subscribe button and help my little channel grow. If you want to help out the channel, check out my Patreon in the description below and become a jarhead and get some of the awesome benefits that go along with that, like these guys. If you liked what I had to say, give me a like. If not, let me know in the comments below why. And as always, stay sexy, camp, whatever the fuck they called the camp in this movie. Little fun fact Easter egg about this movie. There is actually a way that you can tell that this is not actually Jason Voorhees from the get-go. And that's because the little arrows and highlights on the hockey mask are blue instead of Jason's iconic red. That and the fact that the mask isn't all like fucked up from his previous ventures like in the other movies. Many people point to this saying, yes, that's how you know it's not him. But really, I mean, it's a movie and a Friday the 13th movie at that. I mean, continuity hasn't always been their strongest suit. So the fact that they changed the color of some highlights on the mask doesn't really point me in the direction of, yeah, of course it's not Jason. Honestly, it's just one of those things that you accept because these movies' continuity is just kind of all over the fucking place at times. I mean, look at the way he looks in part 2 versus part 3 and even part 4. None of that shit lines up at all. It's like whenever Jason's mask, whatever it may be, depending on which movie you're watching, comes off, it's kind of like a big guessing game as to what kind of monstrous creature will be behind the mask. Motherfucking blue arrows gave the shit away. Come the fuck on.